You're listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me today are Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells. We're the editors of Manufacturing.net and Industrial Equipment News, and we each have about 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we cover the 5 biggest stories in manufacturing and the implications they have on the industry going forward. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and share the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by giving us a positive review on Apple Podcast or whatever platform you use. Finally, to email the podcast, you can reach us at Jeff, Anna, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. How are you guys doing today?
David, I'm doing especially awesome because last night, the Eustis-Ford High School boys basketball team brought home the first state championship in school history. So it is a great day to be a Falcon.
Whoa.
That is an incredible achievement. How big is Eustis-Ford?
We're about 1,200 strong.
Whoa.
I don't live there anymore. My hometown. It's where I went to high school, where I grew up. But awesome seeing the boys lift the gold ball last night.
Well, congratulations to the Falcons. That's awesome.
That was cool.
It's good that they actually get to play sports. I know that those are still shut down in places.
Yeah, it's got to be tough. They all had the masks on and stuff. But, got it through.
Anna, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. And wondering where Jeff was on his high school basketball team. What were you doing back there? Just
when I was in high school,
not winning state, or
we I never made it out of regionals.
Oh.
We were always like a 500 type team. So
I come from like a historic failure at sports of a high school. We made ESPN one year because we were historically bad in a football game. Personal highlights. Anyway, let's jump into the top stories in the manufacturing industry and move beyond personal failures and the achievements of a new generation.
We can come back to that. I hope to.
The 5th most popular story on our websites this week, missile-firing missile fights incoming airstrikes. Excuse me. This week, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, awarded $22 million in contracts to General Atomics, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman. The money is part of the Longshot program, which hopes to develop an air-launched combat drone and its own arsenal of air-to-air missiles. Basically, the hope is to develop a frontline UAV that can take the fight to incoming airstrikes. Longshot could also keep piloted fighter jets in reserve for follow-up attacks, minimizing pilot risk. Jeff, your thoughts on the story?
First of all, DARPA is amazing.
Yes.
As far as especially for a government agency, they do some pretty incredible stuff. And it's not just military aerospace. It goes into materials and a lot of other different really cool stuff. The concept, don't you kind of wonder, why don't we think about this sooner? Like sending the missile out to hit the missile instead of fighter planes and all that. So, it's a pretty incredible concept. And I think it sort of is building on everything that's been brought about by the success of the drones and the unmanned aerial vehicles, in terms of taking human beings sort of out of the process, or out of harm's way, if you will, and sort of minimizing potential casualties that way. So I think it builds definitely on that. It's still in the prototyping phase. We're not there yet, but the overall technology, if finalized and if it comes to fruition, would be pretty amazing. Not going real deep here. I know this could be a whole nother conversation, but at some point, though, I think we do have to look a little bit at the amount of unmanned weaponry that we're kind of putting out there, or strategies behind unmanned approaches, simply because it seems to be a much easier way potentially to justify a lot of these military actions, because there's not a human being involved. So you don't have to worry about those types of reports coming out and what was the true cost. Well, it is still hundreds of millions of dollars in equipment, but there wasn't any lives lost, on our side. Okay?
Right.
So it's an interesting defensive approach. In other words, when you're looking at a missile, meeting an incoming missile head on before it gets into a critical airspace. So,
yeah, I just want to echo your thoughts on DARPA. Pretty much anything coming out of that agency is incredible. And talk about this being at the prototype phase. I think that's where everything is at DARPA.
Yeah.
Or even just concept phase. I just wanted to say, it's not just safer for pilots because it can get closer. But because it can get closer to the threat, it can make the missiles more effective. And eventually, Longshot will make and fly a full-scale air-launched demonstration system capable of controlled flight before, during, and after weapon ejection under operational conditions. So, eventually, the plan is to make at least a full-scale prototype of this. Anna, your thoughts on the drones?
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, anything described as being able to increase the survivability of anything sounds like a benefit, right? I just concluded a Jimmy Stewart biography because the pandemic has just galvanized the nerdiness that already existed. It's just getting worse and worse. But anyway, if you think about some of the wartime scenarios where these fighter pilots, like in World War II, just the massive casualties that resulted from some of those, I think, this sounds like a win for the military. And I thought it was interesting too. A few weeks back we talked about drones and the challenges in policing them in more like consumer applications. But this does show that some of the military applications and how drones can be much more than just like the future of Amazon deliveries or how hobbyists spy on you in your backyard.
Yeah, I guess it wouldn't be the level of threat they were thinking about, but to use something like this to take out drones in occupying restricted airspace and stuff like that, that could be a potential solution for that as well. Hopefully not necessary, but likely. The fourth most popular story on the websites this week was about a sandwich manufacturer that burned down in Iowa. On Saturday, February 27th, pride of Iowa's food manufacturing facility burned to the ground in Marengo, Iowa. The company is a 40-year-old family-owned business that makes sandwiches, primarily for convenience stores, hospitals, schools, prisons, and vending companies. Not sure why I pointed at you for prisons.
I was going to say, what was that about?
Not sure. That's a subconscious thing we're just going to work with later. Firefighters struggled with the blaze because the facility was recently remodeled and the department never received an updated floor plan. The offices, production floor, and warehouse were a total loss. However, they brought in an excavator to separate the production facility from the freezer, which was saved. The facility was closed when the fire broke out and no one was injured. The company has about 75 employees who make 600,000 sandwiches every week, and the cause is still under investigation, but the fire likely started in the office. Jeff, your thoughts on this incident?
Yeah, really sad story. They just done a bunch of remodeling there, which was actually part of the issue. The fire department, it's a small town. It's like 2,500 people, I believe, in the town. So probably a volunteer type fire department. They didn't have a lot of understanding of the internal structure of the remodel of the building, so it kind of delayed their efforts and made it a little bit more difficult. And I guess the first thing that I looked at is we talk so much about the Internet of Things and an industrial application, and with a lot of these technologies actually starting in manufacturing and then branching out from there, because if they can prove their reliability and their capabilities in such a demanding setting, then they can also be used elsewhere. And when you think about things in terms of connectivity and being able to share data and information here, if there was an electronic version of this floor plan, this a blueprint of it that could be shared electronically, you'd think potentially the firefighters could have pulled this up on a mobile device, had a better idea what they were facing going in, and may have been able to save more of the building. So it's hard because when we look at that type of technology, it is an investment. There's training, there's implementation costs, all of that stuff. But in this instance, I mean, you're looking at a place that employs 75 people in a small town and has a much bigger effect beyond that.
I mean, definitely a small town indeed. Like, now that you brought the level of Hustisford at 1,200 up, but, this was still a population of like 2,500 people, and it was a volunteer fire department that actually had to call in another fire department, and it still took 5 hours and 25 firefighters to put it out. So, yeah, just the most information possible probably would have been a benefit for them. Anna, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I said no sad safety stories this week. So I'm glad that this one didn't result in any fatalities, considering the plant was closed at the time of the fire, though it's clearly tragic how this plant was decimated. And the local news footage shows all these loaves of bread just like wet and ruined. And it was very, Anyway, your life's work. This was a family-owned business. But anyway, following the incident, one of those local news outlets interviewed the company's president, Zach Woods, and even he was flabbergasted, saying that, quote, "I mean, we're making sandwiches here. We ain't got diesel tanks." And a few days after the incident, it sounded like the fire department who described the fire as well underway when they arrived that night, still isn't any closer to knowing what caused it.
Mm-hmm.
And they said it was so bad that they were playing catch up the entire time as soon as they got there. But according to the NFPA, firefighters respond to an average of 37,000 fires per year at industrial facilities.
Wow.
Right. I know that was an estimate that kind of blew my mind, actually. Most of them take place outside, but the annual property damage assumed is about $1.2 billion a year in direct property damage. But for what it's worth, NFPA says that electrical distribution and lighting equipment were the leading cause of structure fires in industrial properties, and those accounted for almost a quarter of the total. And they added that heating systems caused about 14% of manufacturer fires. So if anyone out there is losing sleep over the risk, following the story, I would start there. Those are the top areas for consideration when it comes to safety risk, it sounds like, according to the NFPA.
What were those two areas?
So electrical distribution and lighting equipment, as well as heating systems.
Okay. Just sort of reinforcing the point of having, quality maintenance staff on hand as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Go
just
ahead.
potentially implementing some rather cost-effective sensing technologies as well.
Well, I guess without digging too deep into it, I was kind of curious as to like what sort of scale of operation it was. I mean, they were making more than 500,000 sandwiches a month, but I was interested to know, is this just an assembly line? Is there some sort of automation in there? And, at what point do sandwich makers become sandwich manufacturers? Just curious. Subway qualifies as a sandwich manufacturer.
I think they're called sandwich artists.
They're really called sandwich artists?
At Subway, yeah.
Yeah.
Anytime I have been at a Subway, I did not meet an artist.
Well, it's all for interpretation. That's why
Yes.
they're artists, David.
Yeah. I would say maybe a novice. Maybe a novice is a little strong
Wow.
with that mayo.
Sandwich hobbyist.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sandwich hobbyist.
Obviously didn't get it.
Yeah.
You didn't understand their
No,
art.
he didn't feel the passion. I did note that the owner said that right now operations are at a standstill, but they're looking for a temporary space, which also sort of reinforced that maybe there wasn't a lot of equipment on hand. They just, need a place to set up an assembly line. And but the plan is to build in the town. So at least those jobs hopefully won't be lost in the small town for good.
That's good.
The third most popular story this week. SpaceX Starship lands and then explodes. Again. Last Wednesday, SpaceX successfully landed its futuristic Starship after a 6.5-minute test flight. It was just enough time for a SpaceX commentator to say, "Third time's a charm," and then they cut the feed. The test, however, was not done as Starship 10 exploded on the landing pad with enough force that the craft was launched back into the air. And not, it was only there briefly. The two previous test flights also crash-landed in fireballs. The Starship 10 was a full-scale prototype of the craft slated to bring people to the moon and eventually Mars. In traditional Muskian fashion, the SpaceX CEO gave SN10 a farewell with a tweet. He also thanked the staff for their hard work. Anna, your thoughts on the latest explosion at SpaceX?
I liked Muskian.
Well, it was just it was a Muskian tweet.
I know it was.
RIP SN10.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know, exactly. I mean, he would just be so cavalier about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've been doing this podcast for 5 weeks, and this is our second exploding SpaceX ship. Slow down.
Right.
Can't keep up. No, I mean, once again, this, this fortunately was an explosion that will offer some insights for SpaceX as they continue development of these rockets, and no one appears to have been harmed. So I know the last time we discussed this, I said that people have the stamina for a few more explosions before the memes start coming out, and then we collectively talk ourselves out of the idea of consumer space travel.
Mm-hmm.
But over under on what that number is. I mean, as I've mentioned, I'm already out. I don't even take showers during thunderstorms. There's no way I'm going to space ever. But at what point, or, if maybe our appetite for space travel survives, but at the expense of SpaceX, I don't know. Is anyone really brand loyal at this point? Do we start looking in other areas? I don't know at what point this becomes like a black mark on the program, or if we just have a lot of appetite yet to continue to absorb these kinds of incidents.
Jeff, your thoughts on colonizing space and the flash burning of money happening in Texas?
Jeff, yeah, do you have a loyalty to a certain rocket ship?
I'm out there. I can be convinced.
Yeah.
I'm a free agent right now.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I'm open to pitches. At some point though, SpaceX cannot be that nonchalant about this stuff. I understand this is part of their message, right? It's sort of part of their marketing. Musk is being this cool explorer, entrepreneur guy, but he can also afford to do that because it's a private company right now. Now, at some point, maybe not. Maybe he isn't worried about it. But at some point, if they ever want to go public and get an infusion of funds into SpaceX, if they're going to take it to the next level, that would be what would happen. And when that happens, everything gets opened up and you have to be more forthcoming about things. I'm not sure a lot of shareholders are going to be super nonchalant about, a $100 million rocket blowing up.
Oh, yeah.
So, and it's interesting because I think there's also more competition coming. We talked about Bezos and Blue Origin. You got Branson out there and what he's trying to do with Virgin Orbit. And also it was kind of interesting the timing because earlier this week, there's actually another company called Rocket Lab, and they're actually going public.
Okay.
Now, right now, the company they've got an established base. They've launched like 100 different satellites for different governments and private companies. Right now, they're valued at about $4.1 billion. To put that in perspective, SpaceX is valued at about $36 billion. So much smaller scale at this point. But again, they're out there now. They're going to be getting an infusion of funds. They're going to have people investing in their business, and they're going to be very transparent in what they're doing. So there's going to be more pressure, you would think, for a higher level of success. They're not going to be able to blow off high-profile explosions of very expensive pieces of equipment. And it'll be interesting to see how that impacts some of these bigger names that we know of, who right now are they can afford to funnel a lot of money into this and now be as anxious about some of these things falling apart.
No, on the cost, SpaceX has said that this specific Starship program was previously estimated to cost about $5 billion just to develop this specific craft.
Whoa.
So not sure how much of that has gone into 3 explosions so far, but I feel like they're into it. Musk is also still very confident that Starship will be safe enough for humans in 2023. And when I wrote that, I'm just like, oh, that seems really far away. And it's not. That is just around the corner. Now, I don't know if either of you guys saw the article or this woman, Shannon Sterone, on CNBC, but she wrote this article for The Atlantic that says Mars is a hellhole. And basically, that's why I brought up colonizing space, is because she basically calls Musk a flag planter, not necessarily, that we're going to be colonizing these places. And I just wanted to say the one thing that she called it, Mars is a beautiful hellhole, but a hellhole nonetheless that will kill you in myriad ways. Your blood boiling, fizzing up like a can of soda, dying from muscle deterioration, freezing to death. You have a lot of options. She wanted to stress that there's no backup planet, nowhere else to go. You can die on the moon in other ways, but basically, you should stick around here, die on Earth, because your odds are better. So, 2 points. Anna, preferred way to die, blood boiling or muscle deterioration? I suppose freezing to death is probably the most glamorous option. And your thoughts on, are we just planting flags here, or is there a real colonization plan in the future?
I mean, fair point. There's more to this than just building a rocket, right? But can't we just tackle climate change and just stay here? Are we just like past that? We're just like, forget it. It's too late for Earth. Let's just move on and try to do something else. That should be easier.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm on board with that. No.
Yeah, saving life on this one rather than trying to restart or bring life to a dead one. Jeff?
Well, first of all, David, congratulations on finding the Debbie Downer of space exploration.
She's
well
no
done.
downer, man.
Yeah.
She is excited And
About finding cruel and unusual ways for people to perish in space.
yeah, well, it's just I thought that she brought a unique perspective where it's just, people think like, and she said it's an inherently human condition to be able to to think that we can go out into the great beyond and set up shop somewhere else. It's just as humans, we want to go and start anew. And she wasn't necessarily a downer. I think she was more of a realist. Just like, because I like to talk casually, just, I'll go to Mars. Hey, I'll bring one kid, the favorite. And then she's like, no, you won't. You'll freeze to death and your son's blood will boil and everyone will be sad. And, every once in a while you need that little slap on the face.
I think the other thing, though, a part of this, Bezos and Musk and Branson, they get headlines because they talk about space tourism, but really there's a big market here, and that is private industry coming in and doing satellite launches and things of that nature. And that's really where SpaceX is making their money, obviously, right now, and they're making a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I think, again, it's easy for Musk to say, we blew $5 billion on this thing. It's not a big deal. He can say whatever he wants to.
Yeah.
At this point, there's nobody who's going to be able to prove him wrong because, again, whatever their numbers are and however he wants to manipulate them or forecast them or project them or share, he can. There's no, it's all kind of clouded right now.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, that will change. Now, maybe he's figuring it all out. Again, SpaceX has been extremely successful in terms of the money that they've raised. I think Forbes is estimating they made over $1 billion working with NASA last year, essentially, in some of those launches. So they're doing some things right, but it's just there's a market evolution here that's going to take place where at some point this is going to be you can't just blow this off, that this stuff isn't working.
Right. No, I agree that, and we talked a little bit about it last week about how I do feel like, not necessarily colonizing Mars, but like a lot of this has to do with growing the SpaceX brand for, very real money making or commercialistic pursuits like launching satellites.
Internet, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What is it? Starlink,
Starlink,
global. Yeah. That could have tremendous impact on the world. So we'll write about it. It'll be popular, and we can talk about Musk again next week. Our second most popular story this week, Lockheed Martin is shuttering a 90-year-old plant. On Friday, February 26th, Lockheed announced plans to close a 90-year-old plant in Middle River, Maryland, to cut costs and increase efficiency, a story we've heard many times before. The plant has 465 workers who make electronic systems used in Navy warship launches. The defense contractor will close the facility in 2 years, and workers have the option of relocating to another facility or working remotely. The plant dates back to 1928 and at one point had tens of thousands of employees and made bombers during World War II. And at least there's sort of a silver lining as it seems like they have a chance to relocate workers.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe that's the silver lining. There might be another one. This plant has had a tumultuous history.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane to even imagine a plant employing like 53,000 workers, but that's the way it's characterized, referring to Lockheed's bomber production during World War II, as you mentioned. But this closure isn't its first challenge. And the Baltimore Sun reported that the plant was slated to close in 2010, actually, as well, before production briefly restarted and then wound down again in 2014, which was when Lockheed then landed a $235 million order from the Navy to produce launchers for 10 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, and it retooled the facility in 2016, creating 80 new tools to help speed up production. But these launchers were described at the time as so versatile that they were characterized as the Swiss Army knife of the Navy, which is a Swiss Army knife of the Navy. Anyway.
Yeah, that is weird.
But I think some are hoping that another contract can fall to Lockheed here and maybe save this plant, which the town was basically built around. And with a new administration in play, there are some unknowns there, of course, and the 2-year timeline maybe keeps some hope alive. But of course, this is very disruptive for those employees in Middle River. But you wonder if, because Lockheed brought it back from the brink multiple times in the last decade,
Mm-hmm.
and this product that they produce is not only used by the U.S. military, but foreign militaries as well, that maybe in a 2-year time period, something, some kind of Hail Mary falls into place there and they can keep it going. But I don't know.
Jeff, is a Hail Mary possible?
I think so. I mean, it's really interesting when you look at, first of all, the work that they were doing at the plant. I mean, we ran a story last week talking about the development of vessels that the Navy can launch onto shore. Smaller ones, for smaller sort of group tactics. And that's a lot of what the work they were doing here was for launching those types of crafts and developing automation and controls for those types of crafts. So it's interesting. It's also in going through and looking at a lot of the remarks around this plant closure, there was an uncommon amount of goodwill from the state of Maryland. They were not really coming after Lockheed because Lockheed, obviously, they're based out of Bethesda, Maryland. They employ a lot of people in that state. So it almost seemed like Maryland was saying, all right, we're going to give you this one. We get it. You gave us you gave us 2 years. We appreciate that. But I think the thing that could help this particular facility is there is an industrial workforce base there already. The plant has been there so long. It employs so many people. And the infrastructure is actually really good. That's one of the points that they made in the statement as well. It's got rail. It's got an airfield.
Yeah.
It's got, it's not far from Baltimore, so you also have port access. So the infrastructure for the facility is good. They've got 2 years potentially to fill it if there isn't something that comes about within Boeing or from someplace else. So I think potentially there is some positives. Plus, those employees are being offered opportunities to go someplace else within sort of the Lockheed family.
Yeah.
So as far as plant closures go, there's maybe a little bit more positive news or some positive indicators coming out of this one as opposed to some of the others we've discussed and covered where it's tragic because when I first saw this and saw a look at the area that we were talking about, my first thought was it was kind of like the automotive plants down in Janesville here.
Yeah.
And where those places pulled out after another, and it really decimated the community. And I think there's more potential and optimism in this situation.
Yeah, the only thing I saw that was potentially troubling was that when you have a facility that's been around this long, you wind up with a lot of problems, primarily with what's going into the environment. So in the late 1990s, Lockheed Martin started doing environmental studies in the area after possible contamination was discovered that was tied to the Glenn L. Martin Company, the old aircraft manufacturer that dates back to 1928. Basically, Lockheed has tested more than 500 soil, groundwater, and creek locations and found chemicals used in old industrial operations, solvents, petroleum, metals, and PCBs. While they don't pose a risk to employees or residents in the community, according to the company, the company recently entered the Maryland Department of Environment's voluntary cleanup program, which will help ensure that the health and safety of the future site users and protect the environment. So that was another thing where we're talking about getting a possible new tenant, is that maybe there's some liability there, but it sounds like at least both the state and the company are willing to do whatever kind of remediation it's going to take to fix it up. One of the things is that how they discovered it was they were actually it was kind of like they found like a local landfill where like Glenn L. Martin was just kind of dumping all their garbage into a trench, sort of covered it.
Yeah.
It was difficult to read.
Yeah, you can almost like see the black and white footage and something glowing in the ground type of.
It was actually the two things they listed were papers in China. I was like, so they just buried a bunch of plates? Like, anyway. It was a different time back then.
It was a different time.
The top story this week was one of the most expensive recalls in history. Hyundai recently recalled only 82,000 vehicles. So when it comes to auto recalls, it's not that high. For example, GM recently had to recall 7 million vehicles over airbag problems and took a $1.1 billion hit as a result. However, experts say Hyundai's new recall will cost much more per vehicle, and it could wind up as one of the most expensive recalls in history. There have been 15 reports of battery fires, many in Hyundai electric vehicles that were shut off and empty. No injuries have been reported as of now, but the company had a study that determined the LG-produced batteries were defective and could short circuit. Thus, Hyundai has determined they must replace the entire battery in each of these recalled vehicles. It works out to about $11,000 per vehicle in costs. an estimated $900 million in total costs. As a comparison, GM's airbag problem cost just $157 per vehicle. Anna, your thoughts on the story?
Yeah, so I think this story really takes a look at the cost implications for automakers as they switch to EVs, especially as it relates to recall costs. But there are sort of two outcomes here. So the initial report about Hyundai's recall refers to replacing this entire battery, which is pretty dramatic. And the technology is new, so $11,000 per vehicle is pretty nauseating. But any other time in the arc of this technology, it's not going to cost that much, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think this maybe sound, the story makes it sound worse than it is. The recall costs will, of course, be initially higher, as it is with any new tech. I mean, we saw this when high-tech electronics became standard within vehicles. So like cost per vehicle went up for consumers. Reliability rankings went down because there were so many more components in play and bugs had to be worked out. So, I mean, we're still seeing that. I think it was Mercedes, correct me if I'm wrong, that just issued a recall because their geolocation tech was malfunctioning and they could send first responders accidentally to the wrong place in the event of an accident. I mean, you didn't have that back in the Don Draper 1960s when it was just a chassis and wheels and an engine and some windshield wipers. So I don't know, from a consumer's perspective, it's interesting to note that we have just sort of eaten those extra costs that come back on us. I think presumably because the value of these components is worth it to us. Mm-hmm. In fact, this past year, despite the pandemic, the average price of a new car was higher than it's ever been in history. But of course, it's worth mentioning that the long-term implications are different, which is that EVs actually have fewer components overall. So ironing out the battery issues in the short term will probably turn this cost center pretty quickly into hopefully what is like a lower risk endeavor for these automakers. So I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, it's terrible now, but I don't think these kind of recalls look the same in 1, 2, 3 years,
Right. Jeff, who do you think is going to pay for it? I know that Hyundai is fighting LG as to who's going to cover the cost. What are your thoughts on the story?
I mean, the whole LG connection is what caught my eye because it's the second time in 3 weeks we've talked about LG and their role in a pretty important or substantial automotive development. We talked about them a couple of weeks ago because they were part of a labor dispute with I believe it was another Korean company over workers and proprietary information, and it actually led to the potential shutdown of a Tennessee facility that was going to be producing electric vehicles for
VW?
Yes, thank you.
VW and Ford.
So we look at that. LG right now, depending on what numbers you look at, probably the second or third largest electric vehicle battery maker in the world. And however they come out of this, and that's kind of for the courts to decide and looking at things, but you wonder how it's going to make people look at these electric battery suppliers because there's a handful of big ones out there right now. Panasonic's another one. There's another Chinese firm, a couple actually. But LG has seen the most growth because they have been taking on a lot of this OE business. So how trustworthy are they going to be? How much is that going to impact their growth? And then if you look at people who are naysayers of electric vehicle growth or usage overall, are they going to be able to point to these guys and basically say, well, this is one of the problems here. The technology, while it's great and it's proven in a certain respect, there's still problems with fires. Tesla had issues with battery fires.
Right.
Okay, and they're working with Panasonic, roughly the largest EV battery supplier. So I think that's what's going to be the interesting takeaway from this story. How is Hyundai going to deal with somebody that, number one, they desperately need these guys to make their batteries because there's not a lot of options. But at the same time, if they're doing something wrong, is this a short-term fix? Is this a long-term fix? How does this affect their supply chain for obviously a critical part of their product line going forward?
That also raises an interesting question about I think we've all had recalls on our vehicles where, I've had sensors in our car. I've had the airbags, obviously, because I think everyone had their airbag. But those were pretty much, a couple hours. How long is your car going to be out of commission if they need to replace the battery in your electric vehicle? Essentially, those are on the chassis, right? They're going to have to take the whole top off.
Well, and they're huge and they're expensive. What do we, $11,000?
Yeah.
Pull the engine out of your car right now.
Yeah. They're going to need 82,000 loaners right now. No.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it opens up a whole list of things because then it's LG, right?
Mhm.
But then LG is working with suppliers as well. How far does this trickle down?
Yeah.
And how big of an impact does it have, not just for this one automaker, but sort of the whole EV industry potentially?
Well, and it was interesting too. Those two, Hyundai and LG, were both emphatic that it was not their fault.
Oh, yeah.
And they really, I mean, aggressively pointed the finger at each other.
Mhm.
So it'll be interesting to see how this ends because there was no feeling at this point that we were like in this together.
Well,
Yeah.
and I mean, at what is it, $900 million potentially,
Mhm.
that actually wouldn't put it in the top 10 of recalls in overall. So I looked up the top 10 recalls and what they cost. And this is based on Kiplinger's list from March 2018. I just wanted you guys to guess, like, of the top 10, first of all, 9 out of 10 as of 2018 were from the last 20 years. And actually, I think more recent. And the GM recall before this would actually wind up number 9 and drop the one that's from the 80s out of the list. So all these, the 10 most like costly recalls would all come from within the last 20 years, let's say 16 years. I mean, does that say something about also, is it something more about the technologies that is going into products? Is that talking more about how fast things are coming to market these days? And can you guys list that top 10?
Yeah, list the top 10.
Yeah.
Are they lumping together Takata?
Takata's number 1, far and
Okay.
away. Yeah, the Takata airbag recall in 2008 and is still 24 billion and counting.
I mean,
24 billion?
24 billion.
So did they break it down? Because obviously the this Hyundai recall is being called one of the most expensive on a per item basis, right? Like the
Right.
per vehicle cost of this recall. Did they say what the top? Is there a more expensive per vehicle cost recall? I'm just curious.
No, I didn't see anything on that. This is just overall cost of the recall.
Sure.
Because one of the top ones is the actually the one that would fall out of the top 10 is the Tylenol Johnson & Johnson recall from 1982, which cost $100 million, but I'm assuming per item. That's not as heavy of a burden.
And what's in $1982? What is that?
I believe the same. No. So Jeff, is this more a point of is this a problem with product development and rushing things to market, or is this just because we're tracking them more?
I think it's twofold.
Yeah.
I think first of all, you've got NHTSA out there, the Transportation Safety Authority agency. They're under more pressure from consumer groups to make sure vehicles are safer. Ever since all that stuff was at the Pinto or whatever. Even though some of that ended up being fabricated, it just drew people's attention to wanting vehicles to be safer as possible. So there's more pressure there, more regulatory pressure being applied. So we're finding more stuff, which is good. The other part of it, I think, is when you look at all of the fuel efficiency standards that are being pushed onto automotive manufacturers, which I don't think is a bad thing, but all of that is forcing vehicle design to become more efficient.
Mhm.
They want it to be lighter. They want it to be more compact so it can be more fuel efficient. Well, when you cram more stuff into a tighter space,
Mhm.
things are going to break.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of this as well. Now, does that mean the quality controls are beyond automakers to avoid these things? Of course not. I mean, we've seen plenty of shortcuts, Dieselgate,
Number 2.
that can still, it's not beyond the automotive engineering community to get past this and to ensure that there's a high quality product and a safe product going on the road. But I think, again, there's just more regulatory pressure and there's more fuel efficiency pressure. Things are going to bust. Plus, cars are lasting a lot longer. So the longer cars are on the road, the more chances you have to find something wrong.
So of the remaining, number 9, peanut butter recall from 2009.
Oh, yeah.
$1 billion. Toyota floor mats in 2010, $3.2 billion. The Pfizer Bextra recall, which I was unfamiliar with, but that was the arthritis painkiller in 2005, cost $3.3 billion.
Is the GM ignition one on there?
Number 6, are you looking at my document?
I am not.
Number 6, GM ignition switch recall in 2014, $4.1 billion in ignition switches.
Oh, yeah.
The Samsung Galaxy Note recall from just a couple years ago, 2016, $5.3 billion. The Firestone Tire and Ford recall from 2000, $5.6 billion. I mean, anyway, the Merc. Well, I was just gonna say, like, it was defective tires and just cost that much. Like, just in terms of a defective tire, and actually a lot of people lost their lives as a result of that one. But like, that's a quicker fix. You can change the tires. You don't have to take the car apart. The Merc Vioxx recall in 2004 was $8.9 billion. And then, yes, Dieselgate with VW in 2015, $18.3 billion. Incredible. Wow. Well, hopefully, along with Anna's calls for less, disasters and safety accidents, maybe we could get less recalls. Although I feel like I get an email from the CSPC.
Yeah, I don't know. Personally, I don't know if I want less recalls. You got to fix something.
Yeah, no, less recalls because everyone's
because everything is
better.
good.
Yeah, not just like willful ignorance. I just want to hear about it until I'm hospitalized as a result of it.
Right, yeah.
And then,
don't make me take my car into the dealership. That's too much work.
Right? Just call the guy that's going to chase my ambulance. He can sort it out for me. So that moves us on to the next segment. In case you missed it, the lesser known stories from this week that are still going to potentially make a big impact on the industry and our world going forward. Anna, what was your story this week?
So the story I selected was about Petaluma, California, a city in Northern California that plans to go carbon neutral. And they have banned the development of any new gas stations within the city. And the ban is actually effective basically immediately after the council votes this month. So the headline got me.
Yeah.
I think this decision kind of speaks to just how fast the move toward electric cars seems to be accelerating, though I wonder if it sounds more progressive than it is. I was kind of looking into it, and the gas station industry has been changing dramatically over the years. And a report last year in CNBC described a market where gas stations were actually struggling with significant headwinds. And only one of those is, of course, the idea that gas use is starting to slow, especially in a place like California. But the other variables are interesting, like fewer people smoke cigarettes, which is something that made gas station stops more frequent previously. And also people no longer stop and ask for directions, which is an interesting point. But when you think about your behavior on a driving trip now versus, say, 15 years ago, it is different. Like, there was all those years of stopping to ask for directions. And then there was like 2 years of like printing a map from MapQuest.
Oh, yeah.
And then we all got smartphones.
Yeah.
Those MapQuest years were good.
Those are brutal. Like when you like picked up page 3 instead of page 2 and you had no idea.
Oh, I know. And they were always out of date.
Yep.
Anyway, so the report basically said that gas stations that have convenience stores attached that focus on like quality food and coffee are the ones that are thriving. Growth strategy really has very little to do with the gasoline side of the business. And I don't know, nobody's banning microwave burritos here. So while it's like a notable step towards the city's goal of going carbon neutral, I'm not sure that this was exactly fertile soil for a petrol business to begin with. But that said, the pairing of the convenience store with the fueling option is so ingrained in the minds of Americans that, any development there would need something, charging stations or what have you. But
I was interested to see how big the city was, because I thought maybe if it was a smaller town that would make sense, but it's still, 61,000 people live there. Jeff, your thoughts on GPS and lung cancer killing the gas station?
First of all, I was a fan of MapQuest. I liked it. I get.
Well, I mean, initially,
So
yeah.
dumb.
In hindsight, yeah, I loved it because I could never get anywhere. I was so, just challenged when it came to directions. But I mean, I think it did more harm than good.
a lot of looking down.
It served me well.
Yeah, it got you to O'Hare.
Got me actually a lot of places. I was doing a magazine where I had to talk to mobile tool dealers who were in a lot of very rural areas. So MapQuest is huge. I think overall, I just always think these should be market-based decisions. Let the consumer decide.
Yeah.
So I think this may be a situation where there's, in my opinion, from the outside, looking at a little bit more government
Government overreach.
regulations
we made it so
than I'd want.
Yeah.
But,
Timestamp it. Deregulation.
Well, the bureaucrats aren't pounding through the wall to come get me this time, as one of our listeners proposed. So it's time to spark them up a little bit. So
Poor Jeff and his bureaucrats.
Well, especially, I mean, we're in a state where the market is making its choice. And we used to have a much greater choice of gas station and convenience store in Wisconsin. And now it's Quick Trip,
Which is a good choice.
But that's because you're talking about focusing on other things. Like it's more than, it's a convenience store with that offers like fresh groceries, good coffee, in my opinion. The occasional potato stick in the morning.
Potato stick. You should sell that.
I'm not going to knock them. I had them yesterday.
I was talking to Anna. Anna, don't knock them. Those are the hash brown sticks.
Don't call him potato stick. That's a terrible name.
It's a stick of potato.
It's closer to potato than anything else.
Yeah, right? What am I going to call it? A hash brown roll?
Come on.
No, yeah, not a log. Okay.
Don't call it a log.
Sorry, I'll stay out of it.
And they're just closer to the door than the apples, which is why I get one of each. Never.
No, you don't.
Jeff, what's your, in case you missed it this week?
Well, going on the later side, and this is one that I feel cannot be questioned.
Mm-hmm.
This is unarguably important. And it is because it's about the greatest candy bar or snack that you can grab in that genre, the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, somehow finding a way to get better.
What?
They have made the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup better. If you'll allow me to read from the story, for the first time ever, in its more than 90-year history, the Reese's brand is releasing the most extreme peanut buttery version of its iconic peanut butter cups and removing the chocolate.
What?
Stuffed with the same peanut butter, 100% peanut butter candy-flavored shell on the outside. So it's
and you think
peanut
this makes
butter.
it better?
Oh,
Peanut butter wax. Yeah.
peanut butter and peanut butter.
Gross.
No.
The essence
Fantastic.
of the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup is the marriage of the chocolate and the peanut
I
butter.
Yeah,
will be
but-
buying these and bringing them in and eating them right in front of you, and you're just going to have to deal with it.
I will gladly still eat them.
You-
Slow down, Jeff.
In no way is this an improvement.
I think this is
The
amazing.
chocolate is the worst part. We can all agree on that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But, I mean, if you've had the big Reese's, you've experienced how you can have too much of a good thing.
Oh, I was bought one of those for Christmas, like a joke.
Yeah.
It was no joke. It
Yeah.
was absolutely fantastic, and I didn't care that I had the chocolate smudged on my face and my fingers. I was in it.
You
man.
were rich in big cups over the holiday season.
I was all about it. So
I don't know.
The bigger question, because this is undebatably fantastic, the bigger question is,
Disagree.
what is the thing at the grocery store when you're checking out? What's the thing you usually grab? What candy is it? Or trick or treat or whatever was the thing you always look for?
It's definitely a Snickers bar for me. Like, I'd like to say it's Altoids or Tic Tacs, but that's normally if I'm just like still hanging.
David, I thought you were into like licorice whips and
Bit of honey.
and Necco wafers.
I mean, I grew up in Burlington, Chocolate City, USA. So, I mean, if I could find an O. Henry bar, that's it.
Those
That-
are legit. Yeah.
That is the end of it. And I mean, same thing with like a Take 5. Like,
Those are good.
but it's just, I mean, if we're talking impulse aisle, only because I was buying groceries last night and the Snickers was staring me in the face.
See, the only way I think they could make these maybe even better is if they found out a way to put like a pretzel
No,
like outside.
No.
That would be
outside. Okay,
pretzel
maybe.
with the peanut butter.
Jeez, I almost spilled the coffee all over. This is the one that gets me fired up. No, so like, no, throw the laptop.
Stop this man.
Have you had the Reese's with the peanuts and pretzels inside?
Yes.
Miss. Another miss.
Any form of the Reese's peanut butter cup is a win for me.
See, they took, you said, Anna, you said the best thing was the peanut butter, and they just took more of that out, filled it with cheap pretzels.
Oof. No, thank you.
Anna, what's your candy of choice?
So if we're talking like digging through my kids' trick or treat buckets, which I don't do, so don't
I did.
tell them
I'll
that because I've never done that. Like Baby Ruth and I like the Hershey bars with almonds. Those are my two.
Yeah, Hershey bar with almonds, definitely. The Baby Ruth for me, it's just, if they're around too long, I feel like that's the one candy bar that goes white the fastest.
Goes white. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. It like it's the gray exterior because the chocolate's so thin. That must be why.
Yeah, when you're talking about like digging through old Halloween candy, that's the one where if you find it, you're like, okay, this one's a gamble. This one's a gamble. Well, sweet tooths aside, my, in case you missed it this week, is the AI technology that's reanimating the dead. And I really wish I would have known what your story was, Jeff, so that way we could have ended on yours. So let's get dark. Basically, the genealogy website MyHeritage unveiled a new technology that it's calling Deep Nostalgia. The tool uses deepfake technology that allows users to upload photos of dead relatives and, quite convincingly, place their faces onto footage of living, moving people using AI and algorithms. MyHeritage says that this tool allows people to, quote, bring beloved ancestors back to life. And I say, no. It is a tool to go in the ground and spin the corpse in the coffin.
Wait, so it makes like pretend videos of people?
Yeah, so you basically upload an old black and white photo of your great-great-grandma, and it makes a very convincing video of the grandma looking around. You know, it's basically just kind of like look up, look down, look around, look straight at you into its murderous eyes.
Yeah.
And then you're supposed to somehow have some sort of connection with your heritage as a result.
So it's people that you've never met is like the premise here?
I mean, I think that is what they're selling, but I mean, it could be anyone. I mean, you know, it's any sort of late relative. And they do stress that they can't talk. There's no audio.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you, Microsoft's technology that we were just talking about, where you upload old social media to create a chatbot, it's not crazy to think that these things would be talking eventually. And it is disturbing to me anyways. Jeff?
No. No, thank you. I think there's better applications for this technology, this whatever you want to call it.
Alex just flashed me a photo of this on his phone, our video guy.
Yeah.
And
Thoughts?
I almost threw up. It's too,
No.
I'm out.
Yeah. But it's already, so I already have people in my feeds that are doing this with old relatives. And I'm just like, I understand if this is helping you heal. It's a monstrosity.
That's fair. Everybody's got their opinions. You asked for mine.
I'd almost think it would be maybe if there was some way, like when you're in those genealogy websites, where if they could if there was no picture of this person and they could sort of take based on your genealogy and where this person is in the tree, this is what we think they could have looked like. Oh, wait, maybe. But
it's going beyond that. It's them actually giving you a message. It's, I don't know, too much.
Yeah, no, real downer. Sorry, guys. Candy for lunch.
Well, bringing it back up, just so you guys know, according to the USA Today, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups have been the top Halloween candy for the last 823 years.
What?
Yeah.
823 years?
That's science.
Yep. That sounds real.
I can't believe that.
Okay, well, because at least the last couple years.
According to Family Guy, that actually just happened 10 years ago in an accident. That's how they created Reese's. I gotta look that up. No, okay. Everyone pause for Googling. Well, that brings us finally to our final thoughts. And aside from your peanut butter propaganda, Jeff, what is your final thought this week?
Final thought is, I think it's, we've been talking about this a lot lately, but I think there's going to be continued supply chain developments coming up. I think it's going to be kind of interesting to see how that affects people's purchasing levels. We've got some things sort of, I don't know if we should be, but they are relaxing a little bit with the pandemic. So we have seen some positive economic factors. So we'll see how that impacts things going forward.
Okay. Anna, your final thoughts this week.
Yeah. So for the viewer who emailed this week asking about why David has those stick horses behind him, thank you. Because someone needed to bring this up so we could have a tough conversation about those. Like, why are they here? Does David need a conservator or some kind to approve his purchases? I think might be real.
Oh yeah, that is definitely real. That is definitely real. Well, for Anna and the reader, who I did have a nice conversation with, though I think he's not speaking with me anymore. I would like to stress the moral and emotional support once again that these stick horses provide, even though our plant manager moved the plant to hide him a little bit more this month or this week.
Plant manager.
And it's his official second title. And they were the result of a wedding gift shop that was selling walking sticks and stick horses. And
You're just digging deeper, man.
You spill a lot of coffee when you are riding that thing back to your desk with a fresh cup of coffee.
I feel like I've gotten better. Yeah. No, I've got a little more giddy up in my step. You know what I mean? No, but really, I'm glad that all of my friends and relatives have stick horses as a result of me. And I do check to make sure they still have them.
It's good use of your stimulus check, David.
Oh, now I have motivation for the next one.
There you go.
We're going to be deep in stick horses here. Another one of them sentences got me. My final thought this week, as always, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share the podcast. Also, send us stick horses. And to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, Anna, and David at IEN.com. Sorry, Jeff, Anna, or David at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Some have suggested you could also give us a Yelp review. I'm not certain the impact of that. But make sure to have email the podcast in the subject line. And thank you to everybody that has responded with their feedback and positive feedback, mostly. That's been encouraging. Thank you. And if you don't, keep it to yourself. For Jeff, Anna, I'm David Manti, and this has been the Today in Manufacturing podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.